What up, everybody? Welcome to Coffee Hour. What day is it? It's hump day. We made it halfway through the week on the downward slide. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for taking time out of your day to be here for Coffee Hour, getting your day started. Maybe you're at a safety meeting. Maybe you're like Adam. Maybe you're in the vehicle driving to work this early in the morning. Who knows? But we are very appreciative that you're here. We got a great show for you today. Today, we're going to be looking at the optional method. We're going to be finishing it out and doing the individual dwelling units using the optional method. And it differs from what we did in 220.84, which we had 3 or more multifamily dwellings, and we could use the optional method for that, or dwelling units. And in this case, we don't. And what we have is just the individual dwelling unit. So we're going to be shifting gears to 220.82 today, show you how to apply the optional method. And this would also be the same one you would use for a single family dwelling if you're using the optional method for that. So I'm going to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone with that. Also today, we're going to be looking at a video, a quick little video over from TikTok so that I can explain this video. A lot of misinformation, not so damaging information, not like it's like, ooh, everybody's, it's going to change. But it is when you have people that post things on social media. Sometimes one of the segments that we're going to do in upcoming shows is we're going to basically go look at something and call it out and explain it and go into more detail so there's less confusion. So again, everybody's fair game. Every video is fair game. If, it's something that you want to hang around for, then that's something we're going to go over today as well. And that is going to critique a video or a little video that we saw on TikTok and kind of explain it a little bit. So we got that going on today. And if we got time, we'll look at the hog, but I don't know that we'll have time because we got to do our introductions. Like always, folks, I want to know where you're from. If you're in our program, what you got going on. Again, I live vicariously through y'all. I love to see students and people be successful. Let me know if you have any achievements that you've achieved recently. If you're a Fast Tracks member. For those that are new to the show, this is not where I just do exam prep. We talk code, we do some lessons, but that's not all we do. We cover a bunch of different things, and I want to make it a show that you enjoy coming to in the morning. And again, you can suggest topics by simply going to Paul Abernathy. That's PaulAbernathy.com. And you can go there and use a simple portal, submit your questions, submit your topics, submit your idea, and it can make it on a future episode of Coffee Hour, or it could be in a podcast that is on our Master the NEC podcast, which we have over 300,000 unique downloads a month to that podcast. It's simply amazing. I have slowed down on some of my podcasts, and that is my favorite way to communicate. So trust me, I'm going to crank those back up. But that's the place to go. We have over 1,000 episodes that you can listen to, peruse through the last couple of years. They're all still fairly relevant. All of that available. And also you can do that easily from our mobile app. All you do is get the app, put it on your phone. The app is available over on our website. Again, it's not going to load anything in your phone. It's just a link to a web-based mobile app. And we do that so that we can make changes and add things without having to force you to re-download and update. I hate it. I don't like when apps do that. I don't like to have to go to the App Store, Google Store, whatever. I don't like it. So we control every aspect of it. Y'all all know I hate the involvement in all that social media, although I know it's a necessary evil and that I have to do it. It's just part of what we have to do in business. But to the core, this is why I created things like Fast Tracks Tube. This is why I create Trade Hog, because I want to be self-sufficient in how we deliver our message. So best I can do, but we are thankful for YouTubes and LinkedIn and Facebook and all that, and even Fast Tracks Tube to be able to get our message out every morning. So thank you for taking the time to join me. Okay. With that said, let's do some shout outs real quick as I do every morning because I am very grateful you folks join us. So I definitely want to give you shout outs to let you know. Adam, it's hump day. Absolutely. Let's have a great day. Thanks for joining us, Adam. And Adam's going to set the tone today to make sure that you get in on the win for the spin that we'll do at the end of the show. Okay, get you in on a drawing. A drawing's coming up too. March 31st or about is where we're going to have a drawing. And don't worry, if you win, your name will be on an upcoming episode. That'll be the win episode, and you'll be able to see your name. And that way we can get in contact and work out your prize and all this kind of stuff. So don't worry, we'll have that taken care of. Frank the Great's in the house. Hump Day. Good morning. Almost Beatbox Friday. Cray is in the house. Thanks for joining us from Nashville. Love having you here. Grace-filled Life is back with us, having that coffee. Thank you for joining us. Glad to have you here. Erie is in the house. Good morning. Glad to have you here. We've got Crypto's in the house. Crypto, thanks for joining us. Good morning to you, my friend, as well. Mike is in the house. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. I see Charlie with the hashtag win. Definitely getting in on the spin. I see y'all getting that done. Kendra, thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Glad to have you here. Rob is our resident Fast Tracks Tube tester, and Rob is over on Fast Tracks Tube. I am simultaneously watching that as well, and it is working fine. So again, thank you, Rob, for that. Angel's in the house over on Facebook. Good morning from Texas, Fort Worth area. I am doing good, my friend. Life is good. I cannot complain. Tino, what's up? Well, thank you. Bless you too. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us, Tino. Let's see here. We got a lot of hashtag wins going on, so that is awesome. Everybody wants to get in on a spin. Good morning, Edgar. Thank you for joining us. I will pronounce this as Enoch, and I Colq. Enoch Colq. Maybe I'm terrible with that name. Good morning. Glad it looks like a new name. Thanks for joining us. Angel over on YouTube. Good morning. Glad to have you here. Let's see here. Robert from down south of Texas. Thank you, Robert, for joining us. And Joe Code. Joe Villani. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us. Westchester, New York. Glad to have you here, my friend. Christopher in the house. Thanks for joining us, Christopher. Okay. Continue the shout outs coming in. We'll pop them on as we go. Again, I appreciate all of you taking the time out of your day to join me. Hopefully we'll get something out of today's episode. And again, remember, you can always send me topics, suggestions, things that you want me to talk about. And they get put in a repository and we pull from them for upcoming shows. All you got to do is go to paulabernathy.com to get that done. Okay. We're going to do a lesson. Now, before I actually do the lesson, what I want to do is let's go on and get out of the way the TikTok thing, the video that was on TikTok, because I want to address it. And again, I don't know that the audio will come through. I don't know that I set it up to share the audio. So I am not sure, but I think it is. So let's go on and look at it really quickly, and I'll kind of dictate it to if I need to. Okay, so here we're at here. Okay, so this is the video. Okay, it says do not try this at home. Now we're going to see if the audio plays.
Snowflakes, admin, and all you people watching.
All right, so a little bit of a delay here. Hold on.
We are trained professionals, licensed professionals. Now watch the story. So in the name of science on an ungrounded GFI, don't try this at home, people. Yep, it's hot. And it does not trip. Whoa.
Okay. All right, so let's the gentleman, I'll just give you the synopsis of this. And he goes on to say, I know it's an echo, probably an echo, but that's okay. I just still want us to hear this real quick.
Can't believe that motherfucker kept going. So, when an electrician tells you, just switch out all your plugs with the GFI, that you don't need a ground, they're false. You need a ground and a neutral for it to trip.
Okay. All right, so let's come back to me and let me give you a synopsis of what this gentleman is saying real quick. Okay. All right. So this gentleman put this video out on TikTok, and basically he's taking a hairdryer. This hairdryer is clearly, I used to have one of these back in the 70s. Okay. So obviously it's all plastic frame. It is a double insulated cord. He's plugging it into a GFCI. It's a 2-prong plug. So it's, again, there is no equipment ground involved in this. And so he does a video and he just throws the hairdryer into the water and expects the GFCI to trip. Remember, the water is contained in a porcelain vessel, and there is no return path. There is no way for a path to get out of that. Okay, now other than understanding there's a difference between something called ground fault and short circuit. Okay, big difference. In this scenario, because of how it's being done and it's a resistive load, it's simply heated load for a heating element, he threw it into the water. And man, it's a very short video. It's less than 1 minute. So if he had left it in there longer, there was a high probability that the circuits would have broke down and it would have been a short circuit, and it would have circumvented the load, and it just would have tripped the breaker. And he says that you must have an equipment ground for a GFCI to work. That is just patently false. So a GFCI is looking for imbalance. So if a load is 5 amps is being pulled, and you have 5 amps being loaded, being an alternating circuit, 5 amps going out, 5 amps coming back, if that's the load consuming, okay, then there is no other path than the intended paths. So this also goes to reason why if you touch the hot neutral, you won't get shocked unless you're touching another path for the current to go back to the source, right? So basically it treats you like a load. So that's why we tell you that GFCI devices are not infallible, okay? They're not infallible, meaning that if you touch the hot and the neutral, the GFCI will not function unless you provide another path for this current to get back to the source. And if that's the case, then the GFCI will detect this imbalance, okay? And that's why we call it 5 milliamps. But the real code says that it's not supposed to go in 4 milliamps or less, and it's supposed to go at 6 milliamps or more, okay? So that's why we call it 4 to 6, and we just use 5 as the nominal, and that's what manufacturers try to key in on. But the reality is that's your break point, okay? So 4 and less activates, and this is milliamps, okay? And this 6 more, 4 or less, it doesn't activate. 6 or more, it activates. We call it 5 milliamp nominal. So the problem with this video is that when you throw that hairdryer and the cord is double insulated, there is no equipment ground. Regardless of what's at the receptacle, there isn't any in that circuit. So to make that statement that, I don't know that I've ever seen a hairdryer that has an equipment ground run to it. It's usually 2 conductors and a double insulated cord. So it's not necessary to have a equipment ground for that GFCI to function. Now, throwing it in the water, basically, water is conductive. The only water that wouldn't be conductive would be like distilled pure water, but everything else has impurities in it, so it's going to have a conductive nature. So you throw the hairdryer in there, the water is conductive. It's not really going to do anything. Now, again, over time, as components break down, you could get a short circuit. But we're talking about a GFCI device, ground fault circuit interrupter. Okay? So what happens is it's just going to go as normal. So the only way a GFCI works is if there is an unintended path for current to get back that wasn't on the intended path. And that's what a GFCI is designed to detect. Okay? Very similar, and I had this conversation years ago with the importance of why we bond the water in a pool and why we do that potential for touch potential. But there's also reasons why we have equipment grounds and why we run them in these circuits and these receptacles that supply things that could be near a pool and all those type of things, and why we bond water in order that if something falls into the water, that it has an ability to have another path for current to flow so that the GFCI can detect an imbalance. Okay, it all works into this concept of how these devices work. Okay, so that's so important for you to understand that. Now, the only part that I will say in this video that I can even wrap anything remotely around is for me to say that you are required to have equipment grounds in all new construction, in all applications. There are allowances in the code where you have older systems that no equipment ground was present to be able to replace it with a GFCI and give you some level of protection. Okay. Is it going to be the same level of protection as if you were to pull an equipment ground to that actual device? No, it's not going to be the same level of protection, but it's still, as far as the eyes of a minimum safety standard, it offers you protection. Now, on the load side of this, that sink scenario where that guy was doing that video, okay, if you have it in your hand and you go reaching into the water and you're barefoot and you're just, heaven forbid, on a conductive floor, tile floor or whatever, then there's a possibility that could create another path. I mean, we don't know what all's bonded in you. We don't know the whole situation. But if that's the case and you weren't isolated, then it could provide another path. And in that momentary instant, that GFCI could save your life. You with me? So there's so many variables in it. GFCIs are not perfect, but we know they've been around since the 60s. They do save lives. They're a reliable safety device. But you got to understand the concepts of it and that they are not infallible. All right. And that video is misleading because that video on TikTok implies that you need an equipment ground for a GFCI to function. That is not true. Okay. Not true at all. Okay. So Adam said he probably had a Federal Pacific panel. Well, that's a whole different story because I did some testing on Federal Pacific and they function properly, especially in a short circuit and overload. There was, that's a whole different, that might be a whole nother show because I think that the Federal Pacific thing got really blown out of proportion. And when the Consumer Product Safety Commission, there never was a full recall, only a lawsuit that happened in New Jersey area. And so, but that Federal Pacific's a whole nother story, the stab lock and all this kind of stuff. But maybe we'll talk about that on a coffee hour. But anyway, hopefully I set the record straight when it comes to the GFCIs. That gentleman is, and this is what happens when you propagate information out there, right? Because at the end of the day, there was no equipment ground anyway. That was a 2-prong hairdryer, okay? Now, Zinsco's actually aren't that bad. A lot of people give them a bad rap, but they're not that bad. Now, the connections were bad because on an aluminum bus, where they used to use an aluminum bus for the Zinsco, it can get pitted and it oxidizes, and that's where your problem. As far as the tripping mechanism and everything on the Zinsco, never had a problem. It always worked fine, okay? So what does Erie say here? Is that why a GFCI breaker trips when you tap the neutral to the ground? Unintended load going elsewhere? Absolutely. Okay, so it's going back on the ground. It's not coming back. And that's the whole premise behind the test feature that's built inside of the actual GFCI. Is it basically in the GFCI to function properly, it shunts to an equipment ground. Now, have you ever wondered why you put your 3-light tester with the built-in equipment ground into a receptacle that doesn't have an equipment ground, and you wonder why it doesn't work? Because it has nothing to shunt to. Okay? Now you know. Okay? That's why they don't work. And then everybody will say, wait a minute, that device that's a tester, that's all that GFCI device tester, that's all it is a tester. You know what they'll say? They'll say, well, that means you don't have GFCI, and a home inspector will write that up saying, oh, they don't. But you got to test the device, the receptacle. Okay? Don't rely on the 3-light tester with the GFCI button on it. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, there you go. Okay. All right, let's get to our lesson today. Just wanted to make sure we covered that in future episodes. I don't know if the audio fed back. I don't know if y'all heard the audio from that video. I've never done that on here before, so I'm not sure what I was supposed to turn off so you didn't get any hear doubles or whatnot. I can't remember. I probably should have turned my mic off. That's probably what it was. So I could have done that. Okay, so anyway, Hopefully you caught that. If you're coming in late and you didn't catch my little example of the TikTok video talking about GFCIs, make sure you watch the replay today, that you'll get that. Okay, let's get to the lesson. All right. We are at our lesson today, okay? It was clear to hear. Okay, thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. Worked perfectly. Awesome. Maybe it was just me that heard the double. Cool. All right. Okay, like a feedback. It was like, maybe that was just me, okay? All right. Perfect. But we're going to do that on upcoming episodes because, again, I think that it's important for us to dispel the myths, to find things. And if you find any out there, hey, let me do this shout out. You want to be, I'll give you credit for it. Guys, if any of you find stuff out there, okay, could have been a little higher. Okay, I could have shall make sure we turn that up next time. Any of you out there find something that you think is wonky, do me a favor, send it in to us. And if you send us in and we use one on the air, then I'll come up with a prize that I can give you. Maybe it's some stickers that I'll get made up that we can use to designate you as a supporter or something. I'll come up with something. But until then, if you want to share some videos, if you see on social media, share it with me, send it to me, and it may be featured on one of these coffee hours where we're going to debunk it and talk about it. Okay. And it's not doing it in a way to harm anybody. We're not doing it to discredit a gentleman. I don't want to say anything negative about the guy because, even the effort to try to help people is a good thing. But at the end of the day, false information is false information. And we have to set the record straight. Just saying. All right. Okay, let's go into our lesson for today. All right, so we're going to be into part 3. We're going to do individual dwelling units today. Yesterday, we did the optional method for 6 units. On Monday, we did the 12-unit complex optional method. Make sure you go back and watch those. If you did not see those, go back and watch it. All right. Now, just to show you, we're going to follow the same thing that we did before. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see what we're working on. We're doing an individual unit today. So we've already done the load for the building. Done. We used the optional method, yielded a smaller service, an 800 versus 1,000, which is a standard method. So that's good. We saved money on the switchgear. It went from 400 kc mil 3 sets to 300 kc mil 3 sets. So that saved us a little money there. Okay. And so now we're going to be running out to the individual dwelling units from the gear that's wherever it may be. All right, so still the same thing. Each unit is 30 by 35. There's still 2 small appliances. There's still 1 laundry. Electric water heater didn't change, 4,500 watt. Dishwasher is 10 amps, and you all know how to convert amps, how to convert all this into VA. So it'd be 10 times 120. That's how we're converting it and getting it to VA, okay? Because watts are synonymous with VA, okay? Microwave, 10 times 120. That gets us our VA. In-sink waste disposal, garbage disposal, by the way. 7.5 amps times 120. The clothes dryer is 5 kW. And remember, we're not doing the standard method, which states that it has 5,000 watts or the nameplate, whichever is larger. We're doing the optional method, so we're just going to pull from the nameplate, right? We've got the range, which is 12 kW. Unlike the standard method, where one range would be 8,000 based on 220.55. We're not doing it. We're doing the optional method, so we're going to be pulling the nameplate. So we're going to be using that 12,000. Okay. Electric heat is 5,000. The air handler is 3 amps times 115. So I believe that is 345 VA. I think we've already done this for the last 2 weeks, so we kind of know what that is. The air conditioning compressor, 14 times 230. I think that is 3,220 VA. I think we've done that as well. And then the condensing fan motor is 2 times 15. I believe that is 230 VA. Okay, so we have all the loads. Okay, so we know what everything is that we need to have. Okay, so let's get back where we need to be. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is our form as always, right? Hold on here. Let me see where there we go. Okay, didn't know where my mouse went. It disappeared on me. So this is our form as always. Now, this is the form. You notice right here, it says 220.82. So this is the form that we use for the optional method for the individual units, single family dwellings, individual dwelling units, the individual units of a multifamily building. All of that is, we're going to be using this form. Okay. And this is available in your Fast Tracks program for those that are Fast Track students. If you want to join our Fast Tracks programs, then up there you see the URL, www.fasttracksystem.com. Check it out. Watch our demo video. I think we have students that are on here. They can give testimonials to the course if they wish. They've been in, a lot of these students, people in here have been in our programs for years, and they can attest to it. All right. It will definitely help you learn the National Electrical Code. All right. Okay. So first things first, 220.82b1. That is where it says to use 3 VA per square foot, right? So it's 3 VA per square foot, and we have to come up with the square footage. Now let me get back here, and I'll show you where this is really quickly. And I don't know that it'll let us go to it, so we'll see if it works. Okay, there we go. Kind of works, kind of comes on, kind of goes. So there we go. So here's where we're at right here, okay? And we're going to be using the optional method. We get the permission to do that because this is a single phase 12240 volt circuit, okay? So we're going to be doing this dwelling unit, okay? It's permissible to calculate the feeder or service loads in accordance with this section instead of the method specified in part 3 of this article. Part 3 is the, what I call standard method, but it is really, it's just the method. And the optional method is just the optional to the method. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you shouldn't learn how to do the standard or the method, the regular method, because that's typically what you're going to see on exams. Very rarely do they give you the optional, but if they do, they'll tell you. But in the real world, the day in and day out that we're involved in the real world, you're going to probably use the optional method all the time. As you saw when we did the services, when we did the 12 unit or the 6 unit complex in the standard or the regular method, and we did it in the optional yielded a better result. Now, if you want to go with it because you feel it needs to be bigger, that's you, boo. You do what you need to do. But the optional is permitted to be used. And if the optional yields a smaller service, there you go. I have the ability to do that. And that's what I've always used. I've always used the optional, okay? Except when we're sizing the neutral, those type of things, then you have to know how to do the standard so you can do that. Okay, so here we go. All right, so we get the permission to do this, and then it gives us directions. It says the calculated load shall be the result of adding the loads in 220.82b, which is our general loads. That's what we're going to go through in here in a minute. And C, which is going to be our heating and air conditioning type loads. Okay, all right. All right, and then of course, here's where we get the permission to jump back over into 220.61, which is the standard method, the regular method to do the calc. That's where we get the permission to go back over there to do the neutral, okay? All right, so let's look at these general loads. So what we're gonna be rolling through today is the general loads right here, and it says the general calculated load shall be not less than 100% of the first 10,000 VA or 10 kVA, K being kilo, being 1,000. So the first 10,000 of our load calc is going to be what? 100%. The remaining over that is going to be 40% of the remainder, okay? Now that is excluding the heat, okay? Excluding the heat, excluding, separating the general loads from the heating and cooling, okay? So we're only going to be doing this first 10,000 at 100%. We're only going to be applying that to the general loads, not to the heating and air conditioning, okay? So let's get that straight. That's because this is under general loads. And as you'll see down here, C is totally different, okay? That is heating and cooling. I always have to make it clear for everybody. All right, so here we go right there. So, okay, so the first thing is easier than the standard method. It tells us right here, okay? It says to use 3 VA per square foot for general lighting and general use receptacles. It tells us that the floor area of each floor shall be calculated from the outside dimension. So we're going to use the outside dimension of the dwelling unit. And that's consistent, okay? That's Consistent 220.5 is going to tell you that that is consistent whether you're doing the standard or optional using these dimensions to get our 3 VA per square foot. And it's also the same whether it's the optional or standard. We're still going to be using 3 VA per square foot. Now, there has been talk of changing that, and I can't recall if it did in the 2026. I don't think so, but there has been talk of that since they did a lot of changes in 220.12, which ultimately ended up being 220.42, I believe, in the 2023. When it comes to commercial lighting, we did a lot of changes to the VA per square foot. And so there was talk that 3 VA was overkill, but I don't think it's changed, and it's not something we need to lock in our head right now because it doesn't matter for us, right? It's 3 VA per square foot. But in future episodes, I'm probably going to do some coffee hours where we look at some code changes because we are closing in on what we call the NITMAM for the 2026. We're getting close. We still have some things we have to vote on, okay? And so that type of thing. Rob says a good question here. Also, let me point out real quick. Titan says Fast Track Black used years ago, and he still has some. He still has Wednesday night withdrawals though. That's where he developed the name Simplex from his Wednesday night sessions. Rob asks about it. Says, "Do guarantee to pass?" No. The reason we changed that is because I can't control how you study, and some people don't listen. Right. So the people that guarantee you have to read the fine print. When they guarantee you, they just mean that you can take their course again, or you can keep coming to their course until you pass. With our course, with the 2020 and 2023, it doesn't expire. So you can come back as often as you want. So me giving you a guarantee, it'd be difficult because I don't know how you study. And I can tell you, I get people that call me that say, I'm taking my test in a month, in 3 weeks, and they buy a course. And I am actively telling people all the time is, look, if you don't have 90 days to study, don't waste your money on my course. Don't waste your time. If you're going to take a test within a week or 2 or 3 or even a month or a month and a half, don't waste your money. I'm the only educator that I know of out there that actively tries to keep you from buying my product because we're not reinventing the wheel. But the way that we spoon feed you, the way that it's done is we need to make sure that you have an adequate amount of time in the program to learn the material, to use what's called the Fast Tracks Interact to ask questions, to interact with me, to use Fast Tracks Tube to watch videos and put it together. You need about 90 days to go into an exam and feeling ultimately confident. So again, if anybody tells you you can learn in a crash course on weekends or that you can buy this flip course that's 100 pages or whatever and learn it, you're not going to be successful. Now, you may stumble and pass, but you're not going to retain it, right? That's what's different in our program. So to offer you a guarantee when I can't control your learning stage, now, if you sign a guarantee for me that you're going to put in 2 times a week, 4 hours each session for 90 days, then I'll give you a guarantee. The problem is you can't guarantee me that you're going to put that effort in. So it's hard for me to give you any guarantee. And I'm about as transparent as an educator there is, okay? It's anybody that's offering you a guarantee it's a gimmick. What they're doing is they're saying, well, if you read the fine print, then I will let you take the course again, or I will let you sit in on it again, or I will help you personally. That's what they're saying. Well, I help you every week. I do coffee hour. I do Fast Tracks Interact. I answer your questions. I answer Let's Ask Paul's. You get what I'm saying? So I don't know that you need a guarantee because the guarantee is on you. If you put in the time, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Code is code. That's what I tell people all the time with our program. It doesn't matter if I were to use Mike Holtz, if I were to use Ryan Jackson's, if I were to use somebody else's, the way that I deliver it and the way our course delivers it and spoon feeds it, and with putting the Q&A questions at the end and with the competency reviews and the videos, if you get the enhanced, it's a system. That's what we're promoting. We're not promoting code is code. We're promoting a system, and that's the difference. Okay. Hopefully I explained it to you. Right. But you shouldn't need a peace of mind. If you studied right, you should have the confidence that you're going to pass it. You don't need a guarantee from me because I've got all the material. Okay. We have thousands of people that have been successful. So you get what I'm saying? All right. So anyway, but if a guarantee makes you feel warm and fuzzy, I get it. But I'll give you the guarantee that you can take it over and over and over and over if you want. There's your guarantee. All right, we won't cut you off. All right, there you go on the 2020 and 2023 versions. Okay. All right. So here we're at the general loads. Okay, and we're going to be going over. So that's at 3A per square foot. Again, you'll see here the calculated load area shall not include open porches. Notice something different. It shall not include garages. In this standard method in the 2023, you include garages. That was a change. But here in the optional, you don't include garages. Subtle changes, subtle things to be aware of. Or unused or unfinished space is not adaptable for future use. Important things like your attic doesn't have stairs. It can't support load. It just literally can't be adapted for future use. Then you don't have to include that in your square footage, okay? A basement, unfinished basement, obviously is adaptable for future use, so you need to be calculating that in. Here's another interesting thing that, since we're talking about all these good little tips, is when you have an unfinished basement and you're doing a load calculation, you're gonna have to include that in your 3 VA per square foot. So if you come back later, okay, if you come back later and finish off that basement, you do not have to add any additional VA because you calculated it 3 VA per square foot, which is your general receptacles, general lighting. Only time that you would need to check your service if you come back later to finish is if you're adding any loads that weren't part of that 3 VA per square foot. Then you need to check and make sure you have some headroom on the existing service. And we're going to teach you how to do that in an upcoming coffee hour. So again, make sure you subscribe because I talk about a lot. If you haven't been following us on Coffee Hour in the last couple months, you've been missing out because whether it's a little tidbit of knowledge and whether you like me or you hate me or you don't like my teaching style, you should be getting something out of each little episode. Okay. All right. All right. Let's get back to the lesson. So that's how we're going to be walking through this. So the first part here is that general lighting and general use. So it's 3 VA per square foot. We do 30 times 35. That gives us 1,050 square feet. Okay, remember, that's what it said over on B1 of 220.82 B1, and it's right here. Okay, and we also give you this little reminder right here in this form. Okay. All right, so there you go. So 3 times 1,050 is, and do the math for me. Paul will double check the math for us. So 3 times 1,050 equals 3,150. There you go. That's what that is. Now, 2 small appliance branch circuits. Okay. Again, have a minimum of 2. That's your 210.11C1. And we're told in 220.82B2 to take them at what? 1,500 VA each. Okay. So we have 2 of them here. Now, keep in mind, if your calculation has 3 small appliance branch circuits or 4 small appliance branch circuits, guess what? If that's the case, then it's 1,500 VA. You can add it. Now, here's an interesting tidbit that I'll tell you. Little things to learn. If you decide to put the refrigerator, okay, if you decide to put the refrigerator on a 15 amp, because the code will allow you to do that, and it's not on the small appliance branch circuit, which the code allows you to do that, then you would not have to take that refrigerator and do it at 1,500 VA because it's not a 20 amp circuit. It's not part of the small appliance branch circuit. It would basically, if you're just doing a refrigerator on a 15 amp dedicated circuit, okay, that is where you would look at it. And we typically will tell you, go on and let that be absorbed in your 3 VA per square foot. Don't do anything else additional to that. Now, that's not the same as if I have some other specialized piece of equipment I'm running a dedicated circuit to, then I have to treat that as an appliance. I'm going to add that in there. But I typically tell people, because it causes confusion, if it's just a refrigerator and you decide to use the option where I don't want to put it on the small appliance branch circuit, which you can, code said, in fact, the code tells you to, but then it has an exception. If you decide to do that, I would not consider that an additional small appliance branch circuit. And I would not add that into your loads. I would just let the 3 VA per square foot encompass that value for the refrigerator. Keep life simple. You're not going to get an exam question like that, but in the real world, if you're doing the calculation, I would not try to get into those weeds for that. Okay. Now, if we're talking sub-zero, we're talking something to big refrigerator, then what we're going to do is we're going to treat that like an appliance. it's still going to get added in here. Take the value of it. It's still going to be added in here by the nameplate value, and it's going to have the demands applied to it anyway. Okay, but in the scheme of life, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Okay, so your normal, just regular refrigerator you might have in your kitchen, and you want to run it on an individual 15 amp branch circuit, code allows for it. I would not take any additional loads in your load calc. That's just me. Some educators might tell you other, but it's not going to make a hill of beans in your overall calculation. And I like to keep life simple. Okay. All right. So let's get back to this here. All right. Again, we're not talking about some specialized appliance, some of the houses I used to do with the big Sub-Zeros. That's a totally different thing. That's a specific circuit for a specific appliance that was a high draw appliance. Okay. Just saying. All right. So let's look right here. So there's our small appliance, 1,500 times 2 equals 3,000. And then we got the laundry. We got one laundry right here. Remember, if you have 3 small appliances, you count for 3. If you have 2 laundry, you count for 2. Okay. All right. So 1,500 times 1 for the laundry. And that is 1,500. Now, keep in mind, this is always something I like to talk about too. If this was an individual dwelling unit of a multifamily building, and there was no laundry in this unit because there is an on-site facility, we would have taken care of that when we did the service, because that would have been a house load and that would have been added to our calculation for our service. If you don't have a laundry circuit in this unit, then you don't need to add the 1,500. Okay? That's what we're talking about when we look at the exceptions in 210.52F, exception 1 or 2. If you don't have a laundry circuit, then I don't have to account for that load. In our case, we do, because each one of our units does have a laundry branch circuit. It tells us. On an exam, it will tell you. Okay, it can't assume anything in that sense. It'll give you the information you need to be able to do it. As we see on the screen, Adam's been taking the course since 2020. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. Okay, and let's see here. I think use some good tidbits of information. Now y'all get Paul every weekday morning. Oh yeah, so he's saying fast track system and the information and the fact you get me 5 days a week. When Simplex there used to do it, James, he only got me 1 day a week, and that was on Wednesday nights. So again, he's going to tell you y'all are spoiled, because back in the day, they just got me 1 night a week to ask questions. Here you got me every freaking day, and you can submit them to paulabernathy.com, and they can be featured on the show. So again, I think what Simplex is saying is that y'all are spoiled. Okay, that's what he's really saying. All right, so that's our values here. So you see these hashtags? That's just meaning this is a cumulative effort. Okay, so this one, this one, this one. So we're going to go on. Okay. Now we're going to tackle these appliances. Okay, so this is your totals right here. So the total VA of all the appliances listed below. We're going to see if this is what we get, okay, for the unit. See what we get. So this is a total. All right, so we have 40. So the water heater was 4,500. So we take it at its value. So I'm going to do the math real quick. 4,500 plus, and we got that clothes dryer at 5,000. Okay, so we're taking the nameplate plus. We got that range was 12. Remember, optional method, we're just writing all the numbers down. So that's 12,000. That's what was on the nameplate. Got it. That dishwasher was 1,200. How do we get that? 10 times 120. That'll give us, that's Watt's law. And watts is equivalent, as you see down here. VA or KVA. KVA is equivalent to kilowatts. Watts is equivalent to VA as far as the calculations go. So we're good to go. So let's add the 1,200. And then we got the disposer, same thing for the disposer. The InSync is 7.5 amps times 120, so that's 900. And we got that microwave, which is the microwave is 10 times 120. Okay, and that gives us 1,200. All right, and that gives me 24,800. And Mr. Casio doesn't lie, and neither does Paul. So Paul's got our math there, and you see this hashtag. Okay, so we've got all this we're going to be adding together. All right. Now, before we move on to that, let's see here what we've got here. It says, provide examples of appliances commonly found in a dwelling unit. Okay, so common appliances you're going to find in a dwelling unit: water heater, clothes dryers, dishwashers, garbage disposals, and so on. Okay, all those type of things. You could have a trash compactor. That would be an appliance. I doubt you're going to have in an individual dwelling unit for a multifamily dwelling. I doubt you're going to have something like an EVSE charger, but probably not, because that's probably going to be down off of a house panel and they're probably going to meter it or something like that. But you could have other appliances that are in here, okay, that you have to account for. If it's standardized, they make them in units, it's unit equipment, utilization equipment, you buy it in a standardized equipment, then you want to treat that as an appliance, because we need to get it into this list, okay, so that we can apply the demands to it, okay? All right. So now what we're going to do is we have to take these numbers and add them up. So I'm not sure this is the right number. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and add these up. So I'm going to, so we're going to do this. So I have the 24,800, and I'm going to add these to it, plus 3,150, plus 3,000, plus 1,500. Yep, 32,400. So there we go, right there. Mr. Casio, got it. All right. So we should have 32,450. That's what we've got right here. And this is exactly how you fill it out on our forms, by the way. And if you're wondering where you get the forms, they're in your Fast Tracks program. Okay. So remember what it said? Okay. Now we're going to apply the first 10,000 is 100%. So we're basically taking 10,000 away from this, setting it to the side, because that's 10,000 is 100%. Set it aside. And then the remainder we're going to apply 40% to. And of course, don't forget, we're going to bring that 10,000 back because we kept 100% of the first 10,000. So 32,450, take the 10,000 away. 22,450. And we're going to multiply that by 40%. And where did we get all this? This is what it said do in 220.82. Okay. B. So double check the math. 32. So let's go on, and we know that this one is 22,450. So we know that's right. 22,450 times 0.40 is going to give us 8,980. That's what we dump right here. That's our final value. That's at 40% of this. Huge reduction, by the way. And then we're going to bring that 10,000 back, because remember, the first 10,000 was 100%. That's what it said in the code. So now that just add it back. So that gives us 18,980. Okay. That's the first part. So you take it. That's why this is solid, by the way. Okay. Because that's your first final number. So you set that aside. Now we're going to come up here and we're going to address the heat. Now, I'll remind you, I will zoom in on this real quick, just to remind you. So here's where we're dealing with heat. Okay. So we've got all this heat that we're dealing with right here. And we've got the, let's see here. We got the electric heat right here. Okay. And then we also got electric heat. And then we've got what? We've got the air handler that blows it around, all this kind of good stuff. Then we got our air conditioning loads. So we've got a little of everything here. So we're going to compare, we have to compare the two. Okay. All right. So let's see if we can go back a little bit. Oops. Okay. Now we're back. Okay. Here's where it can get interesting. When it comes to the optional method, let's go real quick and look at the code if I can make it work. Okay, so here we're back at the code. So we're really working on this piece down here. So this differs, right, from how we did the standard method, where we had to go through this whack-a-mole exercise in order to compare heat versus AC. And then if the AC had the largest motor, but it was the lesser of the two comparative loads that were non-coincidental, means they wouldn't operate at the same time. Then we took the air conditioning, which again, the compressor was the largest motor at 125%, plus some of the other items associated with the air conditioning, and then compare it to the heat, whichever was larger at that point is the one you use. That sounds like a lot, and that makes me tired just saying it. When you do the optional method, it's simple. Isolate out the heat, isolate out the air conditioning, compare the two, and then follow the steps, okay, and see which one yields the larger result. Okay, so the first one is, okay, AC. What is the AC at 100%? Just what is the AC? What are we dealing with the AC? Okay, so that's the first one, right? So we go back to the lesson here. And so the AC is, we've got these three loads. These are our AC loads right here, okay? So let's see here. So 3 times 115, we already know what this is because we've done this a million times. 3 times 115 is 345, okay? So that's your air handler, right? The air conditioning compressor we know is 3220, but we'll go through the exercise. 14 times 230, yes, you want to use the 230. That was the next question somebody was going to ask. So that's 3,220. And then the last one is 2 times 115. That should be 230 because you can obviously tell 2 and then it's 115. So 115 and 115 is 230, but we'll go through it. 2 times 115, and that is 230. Now add all these up. We got 332.20 plus 345 plus 230 equals 37.95. That is our air conditioning. Now, we already know from this point before that, dude, I can look right at the heat and see that that's more than that. That's 5,000. So we already know the air conditioning's gone. We're not going to be using the air conditioning. We already know this. The next would be to go down the list and see what applies to what's given here. Now, nothing was said that this is a heat pump. No mention of a heat pump. No reference to a heat pump, but it was referenced in electric heat, okay? So we go look at this value and say, okay, we're going to take the heat into this value. So, okay, so here's where it can differ, and some educators kind of differ on how you apply this. But I'm going to tell you the simplest way to do this is let's go to the code. Let me go to this version. A little easier so you can, if you got any comments, you can see it. Pablo, thanks for joining me from Texas. Glad to have you here. Again, hashtag win. Get in on it. We're going to do the spin here. In a little bit here. Okay, so now we've done this one, and we determined that it's obviously not going to be that one, right? So the next one right here is talking about a heat pump. Right? Now, if you have a heat pump and you're in a part of the country that does not have supplemental heat because where you're at, it's not necessary. You're down south, there's no need for the supplemental heat, but you need the air conditioning and you still need the heat pump. And in that scenario, you're just going to look at the nameplate of the heat pump, and you're going to take the nameplate value at 100% and just going to use that. And you're going to take that as your value that you add, okay? Right? Now, the next one is if you're in an area of the country that you have a heat pump or you're dealing with a heat pump, then you're going to follow this application right here, okay? So it says 100% of the nameplate rating of the heat pump compressor, okay? So that would be off of the heat pump's compressor. And you're going to take 65% of the supplemental heat for the electric space heating system. So you take the nameplate's value for the heat pump at 100%, and if you have supplemental heat, you're going to take that value at 65% and add the two together. Now, it also has something in here that says, well, maybe you have a heat pump that if the heat pump compressor is prevented from operating at the same time as the supplemental heat, then it does not need to be added to the supplemental heat for the central space heating load. So if they're interlocked to the point where your compressor is not going to be on while the heat strip is on, then you get to ignore the compressor portion of it or the heat pump portion. Okay, you just go with the heat because that's obviously the resistive strip heat, things like that is going to be higher, right? So you get to ignore it, that type of scenario. Now, if there is no interlock or they have a de-icing system or they can come on at the same time, then you're going to have to take 100% of the nameplate of the heat pump, and then you're going to have to take 65% of whatever the supplemental heat is, okay? And figure it that way. On an exam, they got to tell you. There's no assumption here. They're not going to assume anything. They have to tell you. And if they just give you an exam question that is just a heat pump and it doesn't mention anything about supplemental heat, then you're going to be using, obviously, item number 2, okay, in order to do that type of scenario. Okay, makes sense? Okay, keeping it simple, stupid, okay, is what I like to try to keep it at, okay? All right. The next one you're going to be dealing with right here, scroll down right here, is this one is 65% of the nameplate rating of the electric space heating if less than 4 controlled units, okay? And again, 40% of the nameplate electric space heating if 4 or more separately controlled units, okay? So if you have less than 4, and now you may have one thermostatic control and you have multiple strips in a unit, it still would be one control. But this also applies if you were to sit in a situation where you had like baseboard heat and you had electric space heating and each one were individually controlled, then this is where this would come into play. You could take your total values and you'll be able to supply some demand factors here, okay, depending on that. So again, don't get lost. This could be individual central heating strips that are inside of a central heating unit. If it's one thermostatic control unit, then it's just one, okay, that type of thing. So don't let it fog up your brain and how you apply it. Again, you can add way too much to this and make it complicated. Don't do that, okay? So there you go there. And again, if you have 4 or more, then you get to apply a 40% to that. And then you have 100% of nameplate if you have one of those electric thermal storage or other heating system where the usual load is expected to be continuous at a full nameplate value, okay? So that is a unique type of system. And so again, that is something outside of the norm if you have one of those electric thermal storage units. And usually that's going to be engineered and that information will be supplied to you because that is a specially installed type of system, okay? All right, so let's see here. And let's see if there's any expanded information here. Yeah, so this is linked, by the way, and it wasn't working this morning. I just remind you, Section 220.A2C requires that only the largest of the 6 choices need to be included in the feeder or service calculation, okay? It says for examples of calculation using the air conditioning and heating, see examples D2A, D2B, D2C in the informative Annex D. That is so important. This is a great opportunity for me to explain the informative annexes. If you ever get in a situation, guys and gals, that you're on an exam and you're starting to have brain fog over a calculation, and you just need a reminder, don't forget to flip back to your informative Annex D, because there are other applications that you would run into that you're falling into that type of thing. I consider a mini split unit as is a load. Okay, it's different. Mini split unit is not going to be the strip heat. It's going to be closer to dealing more like a heat pump system. Even though it's a mini split, it's more acting like a heat pump system, and I'm going to do it accordingly. That type of scenario. So at the end of the day, one of the things that we look at is and some people will just take the full value of the load for the mini split and use that in their calculation. But it acts more like a heat pump system. So that's how I would treat it in this scenario. That type of thing. All right, so that's what we have on all of these applications here. Your choices, you just pick the choice. Okay, so let's go back to our lesson. In our lesson over here, that was the AC. Okay, we don't have a thermal storage unit, so we're ignoring that one. Okay, and over here, we have the supplemental heat, the heat pump system include the heat at 100%, yada, yada, yada. And of course, so this one right here, we're able to use. Now, this one, electric space heating, if fewer than 4 separately controlled units. Now, that's what we have. Now, this is where people will say, Paul, but wait a minute. Don't you just put the heat right here, okay? And when you go look at the application in the code right here, they'll say right here, it just says, Paul, just take 65% of the nameplate rating of the electric space heating, okay? Now, if that was baseboard heat, easy peasy. But in our scenario, the nameplate on this total electric space heating unit or this central heating unit is the value you get off of this. But in our program, we're also going to incorporate in the blower motor in order to get a more accurate result, because we're going to be applying the 65% to that. Okay. Now, there will be some people out there that say, no, ignore the blower, right? And just take the 5,000 at 65. I'm here to tell you that's not going to make a hill of beans in the overall. We're talking 345 VA. But I am a believer that when it comes to this, in the optional method, You could be the code purist and say, nope, it says only apply it to the electric space heating. And as far as I'm concerned, or as far as many people are concerned, the 5,000 is the only heating. I'm saying in a real life scenario and on an exam, it's not going to make a hill of beans in your amp calculation. I would get into the practice, if you're going to go this route, unless you're doing strip heating or baseboard heats that don't have a blower, I would include the mechanism that blows the heat around. Some people will agree to disagree, but this is how we're going to teach it. So again, if you disagree, that's okay. You do you, boo. But that's how we're going to do it. So we take that full value, 5,345, which was the 5 plus the air blower motor, which is 3 times 115, which is 345. We're going to add the two together and we're going to plop it in right here. And we're going to apply this nice and nifty 65%. Now, why are we using 65%? Because it says that it only has one heat strip. So in our case, it says 65% of the nameplate rating of electric space heating if less than 4 separately controlled. So as far as I'm concerned, I only have 1 controlled. So I'm going to be using 65% for this. So I'm going to take that 5,345 times 0.65 to see if we're right. So there's 3,474.25. I'm going to drop the 0.25, and that's how I got 3474. Okay. All right. So taking that there, right? And here is this value. So I'm not sure why this did this. Okay. So there's an error. Okay. This should have been, oops, hold on. This should have been 3474 right here. Okay. So this is an error. Okay. And this is the error that I left in there. So, or I might not have remembered this error, but anyway, there it is. So this is the value that we should be using. So we're going to work this through and correct it. This should be 3474. So let's work it as 3474. Oh, no, it didn't. I'm sorry. It is correct. Womp, womp, womp. Hold on. It isn't an error. Hold on. Where's my womper at? Hold on. Ah! We're using the 3795. That is right. I'm sorry. It is corrected. Okay. So before we applied the 65%, it would have been greater. But we applied the demand. So this one ends up winning. Hey, that's different. That is different than what we've been doing. In this one, the AC is actually winning. Whoop, whoop. Okay, so scratch the heat out this time. Moot point. So this is 3795. So we are right. Hey, I'm glad. I don't know what I was looking at. I was being a brain fart there. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All right, so let's do this. So we have 3795. Now we have to add that back, right, to our original value from part B, right, that we did earlier, which we'll go back and see what. So that's this. And this is from 220.82b that we did earlier. We did this, we compared, and AC actually won at 100% versus the heat at 65%. And so there we go. So 3795. So that is correct. There you go. That's the larger. Now we add this to the 18,980. Let's make sure it's right. 3795. Okay. Plus 18,980. And that is 22, Paul, check my math again, 22,775. And that's what we got here, 22,775. Good morning, Daniel. Thanks for joining us over on Facebook. All right, 22,775, that's our value. All right, so we're doing this individual dwelling unit, okay? So 22,775 divided by 240, that's what our voltage is. Obviously, you can tell that's what our system voltage is here, right? Cool, Paul's got me the check, so we're good. So we'll do 22,775, and we're going to divide this by 240. Double check in here, and is 94.89. Okay, so this would be 95 amps. So we have to have conductors that are rated at least what? 95 amps. Now watch what we do here. Okay, we have a conductor that's got to be at least 95 amps. So we know that an overcurrent device does not correspond to 95 amps. Okay, where do we go to verify that? 240.6a. So let's go to the code. And typically not working as usual. All right, so we'll go here and we'll go just double check, see what our available devices are. 240.6 standard sizes. And here's our table. Let's blow it up. So here we go. We got a 90 and then we got a 100. Okay. All right, so there we go. All right, so we do have a 90, right? But we have to have our ampacity is at least 95. Doesn't correspond. It's not over 800 amps. It's not supplying a branch circuit. 240.4b tells me that I can do what? It tells me that I can protect it by the next standard size overcurrent protected device. Now, what's interesting to a lot of people is, can you use, if you could find a 95 amp rated overcurrent device, a non-standard size, can you use it? Sure. Again, if you want. You're only getting the permission to go to the next standard size because that's what the code says. But if you want to use a 95, use a 95. If you want to, so this is a load calculation. So again, that's totally up to you. I'm using the next size up rule, and I'm going to pick a 100 amp device. Okay. All right. So that's 100. So our circuit's rated 100 amps. Our conductor has to have an ampacity, a minimum ampacity of 95 amps. Okay. So now let's look at conductor size. And so here's where, again, we get to say, do I size it by going to 310/16, or can I use 310.12? And a lot of people don't understand that 310.12, which is that 83% rule. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? It applies to whether you're using the standard method or our normal method or the optional method. You still get the ability to use 310.12. And in our case, since the service rating or the feeder rating is 100 amps, because we chose to go up to 100, okay, that benefits us right there. In between a 100 and 400, then we get to use 310.12a. And on an exam, you always want to use 310.12a. In the real world, if you want to size it based on 310/16 for the conductors, you do you, boo. But if you get an opportunity to use 310.12, use it, okay? So in our situation, that's what we're going to do. So let's go look at the code real quick, see what the code's got to say. So in our scenario, let's go real quick, look at and see if we qualify. All right, so let's go to 310.12. Oops, wrong way. Let's see if we qualify. If you got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So here's 310.12, and it says for one family dwellings, okay, that's not what we're doing. But then it says, and individual dwelling units of a two family, okay, like a duplex, and the individual dwelling units of a multifamily dwelling. Notice the and in there, okay? So it's allowed to be done for the individual dwelling units of multifamily dwellings. And that's exactly what we're doing for our feeder, okay, to that unit, okay? It is a 122 40-volt system, okay? So we're permitted to use 310.12a through d. And again, this is for sizing the conductors. We already sized what our rating is, which is 100 amps. We've already done that. So that's all we're doing here. Okay. Now, also in future episodes, we will be showing you the fact that you can use 310.12 as well for those individual dwelling units that might be supplied by a 208 120 volt system, okay, where you have two ungrounded conductors and a neutral, which is a single phase system being derived from a three-phase system. And we'll show you what happens if you have dryers and ranges, and we'll show you how to do those calculations as well. We do have a video of that available up on Fast Tracks Tube. That's an interesting watch that shows you how to do that calculation, which again, I can promise you is on the Texas exam. So I can't tell you it's in every state, but I know that depending on which edition of the exam you get, there's an example of a restaurant calculation, which we'll cover in another episode of Coffee Hour. And there's also an example of doing ranges on three-wire ranges on a three-phase system. Single-phase ranges supplied by a three-phase system. There's an example of how to do that, okay? So again, they're on the Texas exam. So just be aware of that. You may get it, you may not, but I can tell you it's there. I know it's there because I helped write all that years ago, and I know it's there. Okay. In fact, it showed up when I did my Texas Masters years ago. So anyway, just give you a little heads up. All right. So anyhow, this is what we're going to be applying is right here, feeder. Okay. We're doing the individual units. So for a feeder that's rated 100 amperes through 400, and our system is rated 100 amps because the rating is based on the overcurrent device, and that was 100 amps. Okay, so we fall niftily in here. The feeder conductors supply the entire load associated with, the dwelling unit, or the feeder conductor supplying the entire load associated with the individual dwelling unit of that multifamily dwelling, and ours will. So that feeder is going just to that unit, supplying that unit, everything in that unit. Okay, done. If that's the case, it says that it shall be permitted to have an ampacity not less than 83% of the feeder rating. And our feeder rating is 100 amps. Okay, so, and again, if no adjustment or corrections are involved, then we can pull straight from this table, and it makes it easy peasy. Okay, so nothing was mentioned in our calculation about an ambient temperature. Nothing was mentioned about being more than 3 current carrying conductors. Typically in a 120, you're not going to do that, have that issue when you're running that feeder. So it's not a problem. So usually we won't have to take those into consideration. But remember, if you're running this feeder in an area that has a high elevated ambient temperature, like running them up through attics, then you could have a situation where the ampacity has to change and you wouldn't be able to pull from this table, okay? So be aware of that. And we talk about that in my video called Derating Demystified. So make sure you go check that video out. It's over on Fast Track's Tube. Just go searching for Derating Demystified and you'll find it. Okay, so all of this being applicable to our situation, right? So we're going to be doing it. And again, obviously ours is 100 amps. So 83%, so 83 amps. We have to have conductors that are not less than 83 amps, which would be 83% of 100, okay? So that type of thing. Not going to get into that today, Rob. We're not going to deviate and get into 122.8. Today is about optional methods for dwelling unit single. That's something you need to submit over on paulabernathy.com. Okay. All right. So in this scenario, the key thing here is that it has to be, if it's a feeder and it's supplying an individual dwelling unit, and typically secondaries, transformers that step down don't directly supply an individual dwelling unit. Usually doesn't apply that way. Okay. So let's keep it simple. It's not get it confused for people on today's episode for that. That is something we can talk about in another episode. Submit that to Fast Tracks over on paulabernathy.com and we can get into that. I don't want us to deviate out of our example because it's going to cause nothing but confusion for people. And these episodes need to be concise. We don't need to generate confusion. So there we go. 83%. All right, let's get back here. And okay, so we're back here at it. So this says it's going to be a 4. All right, so if we go look at the NEC here, we go to this, if we deviate, so this was 100. So it says it would be a 4. Okay, now if we go look at the 31016 and we get the ampacity, remember we had to have a conductor that is good for at least what? Good for 95 amps. Okay. Now, since the circuit is rated 100 amps, we're going to go down here and it says, okay, so we need to have a circuit that is rated. So if I were to use this 31016 and I need something that's at least 95 amps, it looks like that I'm going to be in down here. It looks like worst case scenario. If I didn't know what the lugs were, if I didn't know what the conductor's rated at or what the insulation rated is, and since it's under 100 amps, I might be stuck in the 60. Okay, so if that's the case, then I got to have 90, then that might have to be a 2 gauge. Okay, so if I know that everything's rated 75 degree, I know the lugs are rated 75 degree, I know that the wire has an insulation rating at least 75, then I would be in this column, and it looks like we would need to have a 3 gauge, and we're talking copper. So in our case, since we can run a 4 because we're using something that I get you, Rob, but I don't want to deviate people from the lesson. It makes it too complicated. That's a whole separate discussion, and I don't want to get any confusion on the episodes. So 4 is what it gives us. So let's get back here. All right. So 4 copper, and that's our sizing. Especially also since we're at the end here. I'm already over again. So I don't want to get into a long discussion. All right, so here you go. So that's with the 4. Now, as far as the neutral, we have to size the neutral. There's no optional method for that. So we had to go through this and do this entire calculation to calculate out to get us the 4. Okay. Now, one of the things to remember is that it can't be less than what's given to us in 250.24D1, which is ultimately going to send us to 250.102C1, that scenario, so that neutral. So in this case, we'd have to do a neutral load calculation on this individual unit, and it would not take us much to do that neutral calc. Let's see here. If we had to do the neutral calc, let's see here. So I've got all the values we can use. Let's see if we can't really quickly do the neutral. All right, so all of this we have to use the standard method for this. So I think what we do is we go back and see what the individual unit was for the neutral here. And you see it's the same here, this 4. So it was based on a neutral calculation that we did, unit, okay? So we had the same standard method, and let's see here. We added all these values up. We were able to get us a value of 1. Let's just do the math real quick. Let's do it. Using the standard method, right? We got to do it. So we use the same method here because nothing changed, right? So here we've got 1,628. Okay, that is our 3 VA per square foot, the 2 small appliance loads, and the 1 laundry. We applied all the demand factors of 220.45 because we can. Okay, we have to use the standard method to do the neutral. So let's write that down. So it was 1,628. Here were all the appliances that were involved, right? But we don't want to count this water heater. So we just take these values. So it was 12,920. So let's do this. 1,200 plus 1,200 plus 900. And that was 3,300. And so since we only had 3 appliances, we cannot apply the 75%. Okay, we're doing the neutral real quick. So that means we have to take the full 3,300. So I'm going to write 3,300 down. That's our neutral for that. Show how quickly we can do this. So the dryer was 5,000. We apply the allowance in 220.61B. We apply 70% to this. So I'm going to take that 5,000 times 0.70, and that is 3,500. So that's 3,500 for the dryer. Okay, easy peasy. We take 8,000 because this is a standard method. One range. So we go to column C in 220.55. That's 8,000. We ignore the 12,000 because we're doing the standard method to size the neutral. Okay, and so that'd be 8,000 times 0.70, and that's give us 5,600. Okay, double check my math there, Paul. So 5,000 times 0.70 is 3,500. 8,000 times 0.70 is 5,600. So that's the range. Okay. And then the heating, we did the difference in 2. Now, here's the difference because doing the neutral. And doing the neutral, all we're looking for is the neutral loads, excuse me, that are associated with the heat and the air conditioning. So in this case, the only neutral loads that we had that was 120 volt loads or 115 volt loads was the air handler and the condensing fan. So that was 345, right? Plus 230, and that equals 575 for the air conditioning loads, because that's the only ones that were that had neutral loads, right? And then lastly, we had to account for that largest motor, just the neutral largest. And the largest motor with a neutral contribution, because again, you see we took the heat, so we got rid of the AC. So we have to go looking for the next largest motor, and that was the in-sink waste disposer. We're not going to use the dishwasher because that's an appliance, typically doesn't have a horsepower rating, so it typically doesn't qualify as a motor. So we're going to use the in-sync waste disposer or garbage disposer. 7.5 times 120 is 900. We only want to capture this 25%. And if any of this confuses you, go back and watch because I explained in detail and I'm not going to do it again when it comes to 220.50 and how 430.24 says you take the largest motor at 125% and all the other motors at 100%. And since we already took the motors into consideration, all we're doing is trying to capture, is the additional 25%. Santiago's confused because you came in on the third day and we've already been talking about all this for 2 weeks. So you're going to get confused because you weren't with us from the beginning, I'm sure. So go back and watch those episodes and it'll make sense to you. All right. So all we're trying to do is capture this 25% right here. So 900 times 25%, that is 225. So we're going to add 225 here. Okay. So now we have all the loads. So we're just going to add all these neutral loads up. So 1628 plus 3300 plus 3500 plus 5600 plus 575 plus 225. Okay. And there's our neutral loads. Okay. 14,828. All right. We're going to divide that by 240. And that gets us 61.78 amperes. Okay. So what we have to do is find a conductor that handles 61.78 amperes. Okay. So we're going to go to the NEC. And we're already here. And so again, now in this scenario, we're going to assume that since we're doing the neutral, it's going to be the same rating of the conductors that we did. Obviously, it's going to be the same rating for the power, for the HOTS. So that would be under the 75-degree column. The conductors are probably THHN, THWN-2, or we're going to have at least a 75-degree rating. Okay. So we would go here under the 75, right? And we would go down, and I need a conductor that's good for 61 amps. Okay. So here it would look like it would be a 6, right? It seems like that would be good for, so that you would have a 6 gauge, right? But now we need to go check and verify the minimum size requirements that we have in 250.24D, which is ultimately sent us to 25102C. So let's go there, and I will take you there. Let's go see what it is. We have to compare. Here we are. And let's see here. Expand this table. Okay, so our conductor sizes that we dealt with our example, we used what was the optional method to size our conductors, right? Let me get to where that was so we can see where our values was. All right, so we had 4 gauge, right? So here you would see a 2 or smaller. Right here would tell you that it could be an 8, but we already know that ours is larger than an 8 because we know what we looked up in 31016. Okay, so there. Now, the one thing that I will tell you here is on an exam. Let's go back to where we were at real quick so I can show you where we're at. It also makes a statement. Let me see if I can get back to the lesson. Stay with me. All right, we're back here. So this is your neutral. Okay. Oops. Right here. Okay, sorry. All right, here we go. The neutral, right? So now it states all these things about the neutral and the sizing of the neutral, gives you all of these references down here. We need to look at 310.12D, okay? States in neutral cannot be smaller than the ungrounded hot conductor provided the requirements, blah, blah, blah. So let's go read this real quick, okay? It says it can be smaller, so we are smaller. So let's go real quick to the NEC. Trying to capture all this at the end real quick. And let's go to D real quick. And I'm going to tell you at the end why we're at a 4 gauge when it comes to the neutral. Okay. I'm just going to show you, but let's get down here first. Let's see, where do I need to go? 310, I went too far. Bear with me. We got the giveaways we got to do, so I struggle to see the screen here. There, 310. And let's go to 12. Okay. All right, so let's just look at this real quick down here. We got it covered. So here's D. All right, we're talking about that neutral conductor. Okay, it's grounded conductor. It says the grounded conductor shall be permitted to be sized smaller than the ungrounded conductors, and ours is, right? So we're good there. It says if the requirements of 220.61 and 230.42 for service conductors, and we're not with services, we're talking feeders right now, or the requirements of 215.2 and 220.62 for feeders are met. Okay, so we able to meet all of those, and 220.61 is where we applied everything. It's where we were able to do the extra permitted load. This is where we were able to apply the 70% here. Okay, so we complied with everything. Okay, so in our case, why did I leave it at 4? You ready? Because remember what I said, in the real world, we're assuming that those conductors are the same size as the ungrounded HOTS, okay? But in an exam world, it's not an assumption. They have to tell you the conductors, they have to tell you the types, okay? All this type, they have to tell you all this stuff. Otherwise, that 61 amps actually fell under what? In the reality, it fell under the 60-degree column, okay? Because of the lack of information that's given to us. So I told you, in the real world, you make some assumptions because you're going to choose the conductors yourself. You know what the conductors are that you're going to pick. On an exam, you do not know them, okay? So we're going with the rules. So in our case, we're going to go look at it this way, and I'm going to go back to, let's see, where are we going to? Let's see, let's go to the code. It's not working. Back to the code. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to go and show the ampacity again. And when we don't know, we're going to assume here. And so we chose a 4 because the 4 has to be 70 amps because the 6 would be 55 amps. This is so important to pay attention on the type of conductors they give you. Now, here's the good news for you guys. We don't, because we want to investigate how you would apply this, okay? In the real world, on an exam versus the real world are two different things. On an exam, they're going to tell you the conductor types. They're going to tell you what they're dealing with, okay? They're going to give you the loads. They're going to give you the amps. They are not going to expect you. So we like to test the boundaries and see what you give, and then we can give feedback if you deviate, or you can look at the examples and run it that way. But in real world, be very careful in how apply things to this, okay? The other thing that we'll keep in mind is that there are applications in the code where we could do parallels. We could do 3 sets, 2 sets, 1 set, depending on the load you're dealing. And again, those are variables that you can change. But on an exam, they're going to give you the information flat out. Okay? It's just going to be given to you. So make sure you read the question. Don't assume anything. So in our example, we're talking real world. I can make the assumption that the neutral insulation type is going to be exactly the same as the hot conductors, right? In an exam, don't make the assumption. So make sure you look at the answers and you calculate it in both ways. Calculate it under the 75, calculate it under the 60-degree column, and compare the two to your answers, because you never know which way they may go. And so it's important for you to do it that way, okay? All right, the last thing we need to do on this lesson here is we need to size in this case, it's not a grounding electrode conductor. In this case, since it's a feeder, it's an equipment grounding conductor, and it's going to be based on the 100 amp overcurrent protective device, because that's what our rating is. So we would go look at the code, and we need to go to, let's see here, 250.66 for that. The size, and we didn't, we're just, no, excuse me, 251.22, not 66. Sorry, 251.22 right here. Okay, so we're sizing the equipment grounding conductor. And in our case here, we're just going to go down here and we have to find, so it's 100 amp overcurrent device right here. So copper, always assume copper unless stated otherwise. And they got to tell you that on the exam too. Then in this case, it would be an 8 gauge. And that's the size that we have in the lesson. Okay, so this is 8 gauge right here. Somebody asked what I'm using. What I'm using is Link. It's a subscription. You have to pay, it's like $125 a year for the subscription. You can't use it on an exam. And I'm glad you don't, because this morning it was down and it wasn't working. So it would really, if they let you use an electronic version on an exam, it would be your luck or my luck that I'd get in on an exam and the thing wouldn't work. Just would be in your crap out of luck. Okay, so you always need your hard copy for the code. But if you're and I encourage you, if you're studying for an exam, do not use an electronic version. I use it because it's easier to deliver the message. But if you're studying, you should not. You should be using a physical code book for everything that you do. Okay, all right. So let's do some giveaways. Okay, so let's do some giveaways here today. Let's reset this. And let's do some, get some people some goodies here. You ready? Sorry it was a long one today, folks. But let's go. Yeah, Daniel. A link is a must-have in the field. Also, Trade Hog is a must-have in the field. Gotta have Trade Hog. All right, Charles. Okay, I don't know what happened to my list. All right, hold on, guys. I need some more paper. I gotta start a new list of stuff. I gotta transfer these things over on a giveaway, but I need a list. Okay, let's start out here. Number 1, Charles won the drawing for the ultimate coin. My favorite coin that we have, because it lets you make the decisions. Okay, so that is, you're in the drawing for that coin, Charles. Congratulations. All right, let's do this again. All right, Richard, you're in the drawing for your choice of Minimalist Wallet. Good luck with that. And again, we have a bunch of them to choose from. So you're in the drawing for a Minimalist Wallet. It's awesome. All right, let's do it again. Another giveaway. #win gets you in on the drawings. Or instant win if you win something instantly. You're in the drawing. I have to fix this wording. You're in the drawing for the estimating software. It's over almost a $3,000 value, I believe, and it's the best estimating software out there. So whether you're doing estimating or not, it's an incredible software. You can resell it if you want, I guess. But at the end of the day, it's a great software that teaches you estimating, and it'll do estimating, big projects, small projects. It's a one-time. You don't have to pay monthly. You don't have to pay an annual fee. It gets unlimited updates. It's amazing software. So you're in the bidding software drawing. Don't say you won. Don't say when do you get it. You got it. You're in the drawing for it, and we will let everybody know. You'll see an episode that'll have everybody that won on it. Okay, let's do some more giveaways here. We'll let everybody know. There'll be an episode that lets you know every winner. And there'll be an episode where I do the drawing, where I pull your names out. All right. Like that one. So here, Gracefield Life, you're in for the Ohms Wheel coin. Hopefully you get that. It's an awesome coin. I don't have, let's see here. I thought I made some additional. Oh, here it is. I made some more up. So here it is. I don't have any coffee to drop it into, but these are the neat little Ohms wheel coins that, show your pride. This is a master electrician one. We have a journeyman one. And so there you go. That's the Ohms wheel coin. Neat to have in your pocket. We have an inspector coin, ultimate decision coin, pass or fail coin, a bunch of those coins. So there you go. You're in for that drawing. Congratulations. All right, let's do another one here. I think all the boys probably jump for joy anytime a woman walks into the room, Gray. So you know what I'm saying? All right. There you go. It's not sexist. That's just fact, Anyway, okay. I guess some guys could jump if guys walked into the room, but that's a whole different topic that I'm not going to get into. All right. So, Ben, you also are in for the Ohms wheel coin. All right. So congratulations. It seems like that's a hot one today. Let's do another giveaway. I'm on a roll. Let's do another one here. One more. All right, Daniel Fulham. What you won, Daniel, is instant access to FastTrack's tube. Now, I say instant, but it's not all that instant, okay? So what you have to do is I'll go over there and show you, Daniel. What folks have to do is over here on FastTrack's tube, you have to go right here under the membership plan and click membership plans right here. And you click membership plan, and then you have to come down here and choose free membership right here, there, and you pick a username and fill out your information and your passwords or email address, and then you click submit. And when you do that, we will elevate you within 24 hours to 48 hours. We will elevate you up to the annual membership, and you'll get access for 12 months over on that video platform. You'll get that access. Okay. And also it helps out if you email us and let us know your username and your email address, but we usually will see it and elevate you, but to make sure it happens, you could reach out to us and we will do that. If you already have a FastTrack's Tube subscription, then let us know. We'll spin again, that type of thing. David says a monthly. They do have monthly subscriptions as well. I think for the link, I think they do. No, that is not FastTrack's. Okay, Daniel, that is not a course. That is our video platform. And over on FastTrack's Tube, FastTrackTube.com. It's not a course. It's our video platform like YouTube. Think that's where that is. Okay. All right. All right, guys, that's it. I have ran grossly over today. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something about doing the individual dwelling units. Hopefully you learned a little something about whether or not you got to use a 60 degree or 75, depending on what your conductors are rated for. Let's see. You learned the fact that you have to use the standard method to calculate the neutral. Or you can just make it the same size as your HOTS and don't have to do any math for the neutral if you want. That's an option as well. Or you could probably buy a cable that's already has the conductors already in it. And in most of the cables, the neutral cannot be more than 2 sizes smaller than the hot conductors. Okay, so that pretty much probably dictates the size as well. That type of scenario. All right. So let's see. Before I leave, is there anything else that I want to touch on when it comes to that? Maybe there's something I see in Home Depot. What is it that I see for sub panels or remote distribution panels? There is something that I see a lot. Let me go back real quick since we're already over anyway. What the hell, right? We're already over, so why not? You know what? Might as well exploit the fact that I'm over, because I'm always over. Let's see here. There's something I want to point out to some folks. So some people will install a remote distribution panel, a sub panel, if you will, and it's 100 amps, okay? And typically it's in a dwelling, so it's not going to see 100% of the load, so you can't apply 310.12 for this, okay? So they go to Home Depot and Lowe's, and they'll buy an SE cable. And typically what they'll buy, or the guy wearing the orange jacket, or the very helpful attendants, will sell you something. And I just want to point out something real quick, because we run into this a lot. So let me go real quick to ampacities and show you something. As again, this is a little extra tidbit here at the end. All right, so if we look at 310.16, and we look at ampacities, okay, I'm going to share this with you here. So you'll notice that typically when you go to the Home Depots or Lowe's or whatnot like that, they're going to sell you a 2 gauge aluminum, right, and tell you that it is good for 100 amps, right? And it's basically 90 amps. Because that SE cable is going to be 75 degree rated. So again, it means that even though it's under 100 amps, you can ignore the rules in 110.14c1 for 100 amps or less, or 14 through 1. You can ignore that because this cable is rated 75 and the conductors inside of it are rated 75. So you can go right to the 75 degree column. But here's the problem is a lot of times when you run into this, you've got this 2 and it's good for 90 amps, right? So it's good for 90 amps, and I'll pin this so you can see this. So it's good for 90 amps, right? And there we go. And let me get rid of this pin. Let me unpin it real quick. All right, so 90 amps right here. Where are we at? Right here. So I just drag it to the right. So this is a 2, right? 2 aluminum, okay? So then when you go looking at the code, and you go to 240, it's just a conversation here, 240.6, right? Here, right? And you'll notice something. So that 2 is good for, right? That 2 is good for 90, right? And so, but you saw it in the scenario, you're like, okay, wait a minute. If the conductor's ampacity, if I take us back, again, let me show you. I'm already over, so it doesn't matter. I want to show you again. So if we go back to the ampacity, remember we have a 90 amp rated breaker, and you go down here and you see the 2, and you see it's rated 90. You're thinking, okay, well, if it's a 2 gauge, I put it on it. Now, what people say, well, wait a minute, since it doesn't correspond, then I can go up. But the fact of the matter is, it does correspond. Since the conductor's rated 90, right? And there's an overcurrent device that's rated 90, right? Then I have to protect the 2 gauge SER at 90. And there's so many people say, well, I can bump this up and put a 2 gauge aluminum because they sell it at Home Depot. They say, or Lowe's, that it is okay to install it on 100 amp. Okay, so let's get this record straight here. You ready? Can I terminate that 2 on a 100 amp rated breaker, let's say, or main lug only that's rated 100 amp in a remote distribution panel? The answer to that is yes, you can. However, I have to put it on a 90 amp breaker in the panel, not 100, okay? So when I do my load calculation for that remote distribution panel, the load can exceed what? 90 amps, okay? So there is a big misconception that you can take a 2 gauge aluminum SER and feed it with a 100 amp breaker. That is not true because that conductor is rated 90 and there is a breaker that's rated 90 standard size. So you have to protect it at its ampacity. Okay. And that means that 240.4b, you can't meet those rules because in there it says if you have an ampacity and it doesn't correspond, you can go to the next standard size. Well, I do have a breaker that corresponds. That 2 gauge is good for 90. I have a breaker rated 90. I have to protect it at 90. On the load end, could I terminate it on 100 amp rated equipment? Absolutely. But my overcurrent device that's protecting the circuit can't be more than a 90 because the conductor's only rated 90. I don't care about the load. That's, it doesn't matter. The panel can exceed it, just can't be under the rating. Okay, I can't put a 60 amp rated panel on a 90 amp or 100 amp circuit. You get what I'm saying? But can I put a 100 amp, a 150? Could I even feed a 200 amp main lug only or even a main breaker on a remote distribution? Because all it is a disconnect. Okay, can I feed that with a conductor that's rated 90 amps? Absolutely. As long as the protective overcurrent device is actually protecting the conductor, which is 90 amps. So I get that question all the time. That is one of those things where the folks in Home Depot do that all the time, tell you, oh yeah, it's good for 100 amps. It is not. 2 aluminum SER is not rated for 100 amps. It's rated for 90 amps. Okay? So I just thought of that. I did have a question about that the other day, so I figured, what the hell? We'll just throw that in there since I'm over anyway. All right, folks. Appreciate you joining me. Sorry I went over again today. And so again, hopefully you go watch all of these series, okay? Watch the single family dwelling standard, watch the optional, watch the multifamily episodes, watch the optional, and then watch the individual one we did today, which uses 220.82. Hopefully you got something out of that. It at least makes the calculation a little bit easier for you to handle. All right? Okay, folks, till next time, stay safe. God bless. Be careful out there. It is hump day. It's downhill from here. Peace out. There's another reason why you don't leave early. If you go to Fast Tracks Tube and you want to get a subscription, use the 50 OFF, 50 OFF, all caps. You'll get 50% off your annual subscription for those that want it and are not members. That's why you don't leave early as well, because I'm going to give you 50% off. Check it out. Peace.